In today's video, we're going to be covering a super fun and unconventional deck that absolutely shreds in TCG Pocket. You know how some decks are all about hitting big combos or swinging with massive amounts of damage? Well, today I'm going to show you a completely different approach. We're going to talk about a deck that has only 2 Pokemon that takes advantage of a very clever synergy and trickery to take over your toughest opponents. Now, the stars of the show are Dialga-EX from Spacetime Smackdown and Mew EX. Trust me, this deck is way more powerful than it sounds, so grab your TCG Pocket game, sit back, and let's break it all down. Let's start with the main synergy of this deck. We've got Dialga-EX, which we already talked about has the Metallic Turbo attack that can accelerate energy to the bench. All we have to do is load it up with 2 metal energy and we can start swinging for 30 damage. Now that 30 damage can be important later in the game, but what we really want to focus on is who we're going to put that metal energy onto. Here comes Mew EX. Mew EX is great because it can use Genome Hacking. Now, Genome Hacking is the attack that can copy your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. So, if they've got a big beefy Pokemon in the active spot, you can just push your Mew into the active and swing for the exact same attack. Now, that's really good into decks like Celebi, Gyarados, and maybe even things like Darkrai, even though our Mew is weak to dark Pokemon. So we do want to be careful, but there are a lot of cool Pokemon that we can copy and get this synergy rolling. Now, the other thing is that we can just accelerate to another Dialga and use that attack and keep on churning energy from our energy zone onto our other Pokemon. While Dialga is doing some chip damage early on, we can see how the power can come later on in a game. Now that we've covered the 2 main Pokemon strategies, let's take a look at the rest of this deck. Now, it does utilize some of the newer tool cards that came out of Spacetime Smackdown as well. We've got Giant Cape here and Rocky Helmet. Now, Giant Cape is great because it allows us to up our HP and bump those numbers, that way we can stay out of KO range. Having the extra 20 HP is really good on things like Dialga because now you do have a beefy powerhouse that is also accelerating energy in the active spot. The other tool card that we'll utilize in this deck is Rocky Helmet. So if we're being attacked and we're only doing the 30 damage, that can change into a 50 damage hit because Rocky Helmet is placing that extra 20 every time that we get hit in the active. So utilizing these 2 tool cards, we have a little bit more value on our active Pokemon. When we look at the synergies of other cards in this list, we're going to be focusing on things like Cyrus. Now, because Dialga is not taking one-shots on our opponent's Pokemon, we know that there is a chance that they could retreat to the bench. Using Cyrus to pull up a damaged Pokemon can really just end games for us. That's really what we want to try to do, but there's some more sneaky combos that I do want to talk about. Before we get into some of the other combos within this deck and the synergy of the cards, I did want to remind everybody that I appreciate you watching these videos here. Please comment down below on what you think of these deck profiles, what decks you'd want to see in the future, and also make sure that you're subscribing to the channel. It helps me out to know that you like the content we're putting out here on this channel. We did change our name to Agro TCG to give it a little bit more of the TCG Pocket feel. Hopefully you're enjoying that. But let's get into how these other combos work. Another huge combo that I feel like is pretty underutilized in a lot of TCG Pocket decks that have Mew EX in them is something like Budding Expeditioner. Now, we did see it in the early phases of Mythical Island, but we haven't really seen it in many other decks. If we push our Mew into the active spot and let it tank some hits for us while we're building up our Dialga EX in the background, we can then use Budding Expeditioner to just pick it up off the field. Very similar to how Koga decks work with Wheezing. Now, having that bigger Pokemon with 130 HP in the active spot can buy us some time, and then also we can utilize things like Giant Cape. So having these 2 synergies, being able to swap in and out, we're seeing how this deck is going to function, and also being able to pump massive damage onto our opponent's big Pokemon is really cool to use Mew. Energy acceleration has always been great in Pokemon TCG, and I don't see why this deck isn't used a little bit more. It's definitely super fun. So we can go over the strengths of this deck again. As we can see here in this game, we see that Cyrus is going to get us the win, and obviously Mew EX being able to copy some of the attacks is really cool. The tool cards definitely give it the extra power to get it through some of the games here on the ladder, and also for the Emblem event. It's really fun to play and forces your opponent to think a little bit more to stay in the game. Unlike other decks that just pump out typical big damage, you're more about setup and patience with this type of deck. But like any other deck, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There is RNG factored in. The weakness comes when you're set up against decks that can deal that bigger damage and also hit your Mew EX for weakness. We're talking about you, Darkrai EX. I know you're out there. And there's a lot of Darkrai decks out in the competitive meta right now that we aren't necessarily seeing on the ladder, but we know that they exist. It might be a little bit more challenging, but if you can stick to your plan and play carefully, you can overcome quite a bit of other decks out there right now. So there you have it, a super fun and interesting deck that utilizes a different strategy in TCG Pocket that you don't always see. This deck is perfect for the casual ladder, and it's especially great in those Emblem events to get you those Hourglasses and open up more packs. We all want more packs in TCG Pocket. Me, myself, as a free-to-play player, definitely need more packs because I'm trying to grind for that Darkrai EX for sure. I love Dark Pokemon, and I really want to make a video on here for the channel. So if you can, make sure that you dip your toes in this deck. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember, it's not all about just smashing your opponent's face in with your Pokemon, but it's also about some clever attacks and energy acceleration. So make sure you're smashing that like button, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. That way you can get updated anytime we launch more TCG Pocket content here on the channel. I'm PJ for Agro TCG, and we will catch you next time.